Welcome to Kilroy's Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music with your host, multi-award-winning music producer, Eddie Kilroy. And now, here's your host, Eddie Kilroy.
Hi, I'm Kilroy. Welcome to another edition of Kilroy's Outlaws, Legends, and Behind the Music. Brought to you, by the way, by our good sponsor, Total Feeds. And I've got somebody very special here today. His name is Jim Isbell. Jim Isbell has played on as many hit records as anybody in Nashville, Tennessee, one of the top session drummers for many, many years, and a dear friend of mine. Jim, how you doing, partner?
I'm doing well. I'm a fortunate fellow.
Well, you always have been because you've had that talent. I think of you and I think of music and cars.
Yeah, well, I bought one off you.
Yeah, you are a car guy. You got a new Corvette?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I like my cars. I got two Corvettes, and I like Harley Davidsons, and I've got one of those. But
good.
I'm not like some guys, but I have 5 cars, and I just like them, and I like taking care of them.
I've got a memory that scared me to death. You took me for a ride in the DeLorean, and I got claustrophobic because the doors were funny. They went straight up in the air, and it was out by a golf course, and I wanted to get out. I said, Jim, let me out of here. I mean, how do you get out of the side door that goes up in the air?
Yeah. Well, it was an unusual car, that's for sure. And
it was. Let's talk about.
It didn't live up to his myth of being something special. It wasn't fast at all, really. To me, it wasn't fast.
Right.
It was unique. Very unique.
It was unique. It scared me to death. Not the speed, but just being like trapped in a.
Yeah.
I think it was silver or gray, and it was like a coffin. You know, the doors closed.
Yeah.
And you're trapped forever.
Yeah.
But hey, talking about your music, are you still playing?
Yeah, I actually have 2 well, I'm not playing out. I have a thing about they can't afford me. But no, I have 2 sets up in my room here.
Right.
One is rolling and one is an acoustic, and I jump back and forth and see if I can still do this, that, and the other, and I'm an hour away from being able to do a show.
That's good. That's good.
That's the way I look at it. But
absolutely.
Yeah, it takes a little time. That's all. I'm ready to go.
What year did you get to Nashville?
61.
61, and you came up from Florida. Am I correct?
Yeah, I came up because of Charlie McCoy. We were in a band together in Miami, and he was an amazing person and still is an amazing person to me.
Charlie is.
My goodness gracious.
Great
mean, he taught me so much before I came up here. And as far as the music goes, blues and different things, and he was connected with country music and all kinds of music. And we knew a guy named Kent Westbury that I worked with just before I left here because Charlie came up a year before I did. And he called me up one day, and I was still a senior in high school, and he called me up one day and said, "You're not going to believe this, but I went out with Stonewall Jackson and played drums." And I said, "I got to get to Nashville." So I came up here in 61 and lived with Wayne Moss.
Wayne Moss, boy.
Guitar player that was with Brenda Lee. And that something happened with them, and he came down to Miami and joined our band with Kent Westbury and lived with me in Miami. And he said, if you ever come to Nashville, which I was going to come because I found out that the guys making the records lived at home. They just went to the studio as a daily job, and then got to play with all these stars, and then went home to the family. So well, heck, that's what I want to do.
Absolutely.
It might work out as quickly, but it worked out pretty well actually. But I lived with.
Tell me, first of all, a few of the big-name artists that you played with and had hit records with. I know some of them.
Well, let me see. I'll start with Chet Atkins. My first album in Nashville was with Chet.
With Chet, yeah.
I did had a #1 record with George Hamilton IV, Abilene, and that was my first #1. And I worked with all the RCA artists, Connie Smith and Jim Ed Brown, and I'd have to look at them all. But I did a record in late '63 with a trumpet player named Al Hurt, and we had a #1 record across the world. It was called Java, and it was a monster record for RCA. And I worked with, I did 9 albums with Jerry Reed, and did a bunch of Nashville String Band albums. And I worked with Dave Loggins.
Well, you worked with so many of them. It's
Gordon
hard to remember, I know.
George Jones. I did his last hit. Merle Haggard, Ramblin' Fever, and Always on a Mountain When I Fall, and
those were big.
A bunch of them.
But also
I even got to do Dean Martin.
Oh, you got a Dean Martin session. That's good.
Yeah, we did an album in L.A.
What about Caribou Ranch in Netherland, Colorado?
Loved it.
Did we have fun up there or not?
I got the best book of pictures you ever saw.
You've sent me some. The one I like is the one when you had on my buffalo coat.
Oh, man. My daughter still has that picture framed. I mean,
that's a
I
pretty
looked
cool
like
picture.
Marlboro Man or something.
Yeah, you did, for sure.
That was super. Yeah, I think I asked you about that one time.
And I want to tell you, Jim Gershio, who a lot of people don't know Jim, but Jim was a very successful record producer and manager of the band Chicago. And we were recording Jerry Lee Lewis up there, of course, and we brought all you guys up there. And Jim came over to the studio one evening after we were recording, and he said, "Are you about to get the sounds up? Are you still working on your sounds?" I said, "No, Jim, we already recorded 3 songs today." We did 33 sides up there on Jerry Lee Lewis.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
33, yeah. Then here comes Billy Joe Shaver.
Yeah.
What a trip.
That was a lot of fun. I loved working with Billy Joe, but of course I love Jerry. Jerry was so special and treated me so well.
I know he did.
He really did.
I lost you to Jerry Lee Lewis.
Well, yeah, I ended up on the road with him.
I know
7 years.
We were working together in the studio, and all of a sudden, you're playing on a Jerry Lee Lewis record, which went #1, several of them, 39 and Holden, and I forget what all. But, however, all of a sudden, Jim's gone because Jerry Lee Lewis thought, "I found the best drummer in the world. I want to take him away."
Well, he treated me awful well. Jerry had a thing about studio musicians, and he thought they could do anything because we basically about did any kind of music there was. And anyway, before I went with him, he had Buddy Harmon, which was the elite drummer in Nashville, and Bob Moore, and I mean, they were out there working with him, and then they quit or whatever. I don't know how that happened. Well, I actually do, but I can't discuss it.
I understand. I know the deal.
He asked me to go with him, and he made me a great deal, and I went and I had a wonderful time. I mean, I never carried drums. I flew in a Learjet everywhere I went, except and then I got in a regular airplane when I went overseas. But we never went in a bus or anything like that. It was always Learjets. And the band, there was like 4 of us and Jerry, and we went everywhere in that, and there was drums waiting for me when I got there. It was incredible.
Oh, it was a good show and a good way to travel also. Hey, I got a funny thing. Somebody asked Gilly, who, people may not know, that most people do know, that Jerry Lee and Mickey Gilly are first cousins. Right. Somebody asked, after Gilly hit, years after Jerry did, somebody asked him, "Do you run onto a lot of pianos that are bad, Mickey?" He said, "No, never have run onto one. Jerry Lee tore up all the bad ones."
Oh, man. If he didn't like it, he abused it. And they would give him some junk because his reputation kind of got some people worried, and so they would give him really some junk, and he'd end up. He took one, and we were in, I don't know where we were, up in Boise, Idaho, I think, and they gave him a junky old electric piano, and he flipped it. He picked up the front of it and completely flipped it upside down, walked off the stage at the end of the show. It was, I don't blame him. It was junk. And
hey, oh, I know. Hey, you may or may not know this, but when we went to Caribou Ranch and Jim Grosio's incredible studio there, I think there were like 4 or 5 grand pianos back there in the corner. Remember, in the very back of the studio. And I asked Jerry, I said, which one of these do you want to play? He had a Bosendorfer, Baldwin, Steinway, and he had an old piano that he had bought out of the Columbia Studios in New York that had closed down, and all the New York rock and roll records were cut on it back in the 50s and 60s. And I asked Jerry, I said, just go pick your piano, son. And he picked that old rock and roll piano. And I said, man, that is so true to Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yeah, he was amazing. He was absolutely amazing. I would hear him practicing above me. We were in Argentina, and I would hear him upstairs playing, and I've heard him different places, and he would play for hours and hours, and I was just amazed because every show I did, I had front row seat. And every show I did, he did something that I hadn't heard him do. And
Absolutely.
I kept thinking, you know, Jerry doesn't get the credit for the amazing player that he is. They think about his music, his songs in general, but he was amazing. He really had an amazing ability.
You know, one time, Jim, echoing what you said, many years ago, I was at the house with him in Memphis on East Shore Drive, the house there, before you got the farm. And Van Cliburn was a fan of Jerry Lee Lewis, and, you know, a classical pianist.
Yeah.
And he came out to the house, and he and Jerry were playing around with the piano, of course, and so forth. And Van Cliburn sat down, and he played this song with a piano, you know, that was so intricate. I mean, it's one of these crescendos and classical things.
Yeah.
And Jerry said, I can do that. And he sat down and he played it note for note after hearing Van Cliburn do it one time.
Oh,
he had a mind.
I'm not surprised.
I know you're
I
not.
mean, he did things that I didn't think he could do. I mean,
Yeah.
I heard him do things in the studio, but they were pretty basic things, you know, either rock and roll or country, but
Sure.
create stuff that I didn't know he could do.
He was an incredible piano player. I think one song I remember, Over the Rainbow, he started to play the instrumental, the ride there, and he kept playing, and he did something, and I said, let me see you get out of this one, partner. He got out of it, you know. I don't know how he got out, because he was going way off field, and then he gets right back around and gets into it, you know.
Yeah.
But I had some great experiences with Jerry through the years, and I know you did.
I've got
7
great
years.
pictures of you and him together at the piano.
Yeah.
Discussing things.
We had good times, and you and I had
it
many
was
good times together.
Fabulous.
Always
I love
look
that
forward
little
to it.
cabin we stayed in.
Oh, the cabins up there at Caribou Ranch were great, weren't they?
Oh, that was special. That was.
The studio burned, and I guess Gershio sold the whole place. I don't know. I don't even know if Jim's alive now.
I hadn't heard anything about Caribou.
I haven't either. But the studio burned some years ago.
Yeah, I remember that part.
But we had some
terrible.
Yeah, we had fun up there, and the crew that we took up there with us, it was a gang from. I got tickled one day because Caribou. I'm making this lengthy because Caribou Ranch was a special place, and all the rock and rollers recorded there. You know, the Stones and Elton John.
Chicago.
And Chicago, and here comes these hillbillies from Nashville, and I was in the cabin we were in. And I don't know if you were in the group or not, but I saw Bunky and Bunky Keel's piano player, Dave Kirby, and you know our crew walking down to a lake.
Yeah.
And they looked like a bunch of hillbillies that just came off the bus. And I said, this must be a shock to these rock and rollers, you know.
Yeah.
But we had a lot of fun, and I appreciate you visiting with me on Kilroy's Behind the Music,
great.
Outlaws and Legends, and everything. Hey, you'll always be my pal. I love you, and man,
Absolutely.
you helped me make some great records up there, Jim, and I really appreciate it.
We had fun, and it was great working with you, and you were one of my favorites without a doubt.
You told me the story one time, and it's not. I've got to share this with you. And it was the first time we worked together, and I used to go out in the studio. Sometimes I'd have a stool and earphones and kind of not direct the band, but figure out what we were doing. And I said, okay, you play here, you play here. And after we cut, you said, I never worked with anybody like that before. You were just telling me we were going to do all this crazy stuff here and there, and my God, it worked.
That did work. It did work.
It did.
And I'll always be grateful for you and what you gave me, and the ability to walk into a studio and be with you and the Killer and all these great artists that we got to work with, Roy Head and different people. Yeah. It was special. And I've seen your show, and I noticed that there's about 5 albums up there I played on, and I thought, well, that's pretty cool.
That is cool.
Gary Stewart and Dean Dillon.
Yeah.
I can't remember right now, but
we got Marty. You were on the Marty Robbins album.
Yeah, that's right, Marty Robbins.
Yeah, played a lot. We did them.
What a thrill that was, man. I mean, you know.
It was a thrill for me. It was a thrill for me to be in the studio with people like Marty Robbins and musicians like you.
Well,
we had such a great band. The band was really good.
I mean, these guys got together and did a job that was incredible. I still listen to the break that Kenny took on a record that we did, and I call him, and every time I hear it, I want to call him and compliment him, and of course he doesn't mind that.
Was it Folsom Prison Blues?
I think it was Rockin' Jerry Lee.
Rockin' Jerry Lee, yeah.
Something like that.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I'm going to let you get back to driving that fancy Corvette and hitting those golf balls and tell you how much I love you, Jim Isbell, and thank you so much for your time. All right, brother?
Bye-bye.
God bless you, partner. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, this is Kilroy. We're wrapping it up for another edition of Kilroy's Outlaws, Legends, and Behind the Music, and enjoyed visiting with Jim Isbell, one of the great drummers of Nashville, Tennessee. And I want to thank our sponsor, Total Feeds, who has everything for everybody. Adios, and God bless you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Kilroy's Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music. If you have any thoughts or questions about the content, email them. Kilroy Outlaws and Legends, all one word, at yahoo.com. That's Kilroy, no S, Outlaws and Legends, all one word, at yahoo.com. And don't forget to subscribe. Third-party use of any part of this podcast without the expressed consent of Eddie Kilroy is prohibited. The Kilroy's Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music podcast is a production of Eddie Kilroy.